Afternoon thesis proposal. So today we have Joey Schmidt. Joey is in his second year in our master's program. Came to us from Illinois Wesleyan University and has been working diligently on research since he got here. In fact, we threw him in early the summer before he started the program working on a field experiment. And he's continued steadily over the course of the last 2 years, and he's here to present his thesis proposal, Normative Social Influence in the Moderating Role of Group Identification. Joey.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I am Joey, obviously, and my thesis is Normative Social Influence in the Moderating Role of Group Identification, a field experiment with household electricity consumption. So despite constant pleading from Dr. Schultz and Dr. Estrada, I have a very large and complex thesis. So here is a brief overview of the topics we're going to cover today. So starting off with the background. So electricity consumption will start here. I wanted to talk about the climate change and the issues around that. However, due to time, I'm just going to start to talk about coal. So a lot of electricity comes from burning coal here in America. So coal has its own issues, especially related to climate change. It releases CO2 into the atmosphere, and it also releases a bunch of other particles and toxins into the air, which aren't good for people's health. And actually, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, thousands of people die each year just due to poor air quality. And the US is actually second in the world in electricity consumption, just behind China. And we are using 13 times more electricity nowadays than we were back in 1950. And 37% of our electricity consumption goes to power our houses, followed by industrial and transportation for a very little bit. And the breakdown inside the homes is the majority of it goes to appliances that get plugged into the wall, so TVs, computers, and also lighting, so different light bulbs. So a good way to reduce electricity consumption is by using LED light bulbs. They're really efficient, and according to the EPA, if everyone in America were to change out all of their traditional light bulbs with LED light bulbs, by 2027 we would have prevented the need for 40 new electrical power plants. But unfortunately, this information alone is not enough to change behavior, so we have to try something else. A good way to change behavior is using social norms. And social norms are beliefs about the common and accepted behaviors and situations. So it's what people do and what people should do. And these are just a couple of the topics under social norms, and I'll address them each individually. So descriptive norms is the first part. So this is the what people do, it's their actions. It's what people do or are perceived to do. And the perceived to do is also important because there have been a lot of studies done in regards to teen alcohol consumption, and just perceiving that everyone else on campus drinks alcohol leads to increased rates of consumption of alcohol. So just the perception is enough. So injunctive norms are the what should you do part. This is the approval or disapproval of behaviors by other members of the social groups. And another key part is alignment of the social norms messages, so the injunctive and descriptive norms together. You want them to match, so this way they will exert the strongest influence. So this is sort of the opposite of the do as I say, not as I do paradox. So you want to say, do as I say and as I do. You want to show a consistent message. So most people, when I tell them I'm getting my master's here at Cal State, they say, why did you go to Cal State San Marcos? And I always say that it's because Dr. Schultz is tops in his field for this type of research. But with all due respect, in reality, it's because in Chicago, and this is my car the winter right before I came here. And it took me and my friend 3 hours. Granted, we took hot chocolate breaks, but it took 3 hours to dig my car out. It's a lot of work. So in Chicago, there's this thing called parking divs. And people dig up their cars and then replace them with chairs all over the streets. So this is a good demonstration of a descriptive norm showing other people in this neighborhood in Chicago are putting chairs in the middle of the streets. So yeah, it's very prevalent, and I told my mom I was going to bring this up, and she's like, oh yeah. It's also snowing there about an inch an hour as we speak, so again, I'm glad I'm here. So there's also injunctive norms associated with this habit. So this is an advertisement from the Chicago Public Library. And as you can see, it's telling you how you can be a true Chicagoan. So, of course, you have to have your public library card, because that's what the advertisement's for. No ketchup on the hot dogs, which is a sin that I commit every time I eat a hot dog. There are actually hot dog stands that do not carry ketchup, even for fries. It's just not allowed. And they have the parking dibs here. So, and this was a widespread advertising campaign. It was on the CTA, it was on the L, so everybody has experienced this. But there has been this campaign to stop this behavior. There's a lot of people who don't like it. They think the chairs are ugly, they're a nuisance. So they go around in places that have a lot of chairs, and they put up these signs. But the campaign hasn't been effective because you're telling people, don't do this, but everybody else is doing it. So I actually went on the Facebook page for this group, and they only had 3 posts from other people in all of 2012. So they're not very effective. So social norms are under-detected by people. So if you ask people, why did you put a bunch of your lawn furniture in the middle of the road, they're not going to say, well, because everybody else did and I want to save my spot. They're going to say, because I want to save my spot, because it's a lot of work to dig out my car. And social norms are powerful motivators, and they've been used in lots of different arenas, from sun protection, smoking, reducing bullying, and they've also been used for environmental applications as well: littering, recycling, energy conservation, and water use. A key part of the social norms intervention is the referent groups. So it's, who am I being compared to? When I look outside, I see my neighbors on the block have chairs out in front of their yards. So that's my reference point. Or if I go to another street and I see more chairs, then I kind of broaden it a little bit. Everybody in the neighborhood does this. So it's the group that is being compared to. One part of this is similarity. So how similar am I to those other people? I have a picture down here of some women doing yoga on the beach. I do yoga on the beach, so I'm kind of similar to them. But if I was told that these are people in South America doing yoga on the beach to deal with their pregnancies, I do yoga, so I'm kind of similar, but they're further away from me. So I can't really conceptualize the norms of their group. And this was a meta-analysis of alcohol drinking studies on social norms interventions, and they found that similarity was one of the several factors that influence norm misperceptions. So the further away the norm group gets from you, the more you misestimate the norms of that group. And there have been some attempts to deal with this. And this study here, guests in a hotel were given feedback on towel reuse for other guests in the hotel, or they tried to specify it and say a certain percent of guests in this room that you're staying in. And they were able to find that there was a difference with the specificity, but other studies have not been able to find this same effect. So there's some clarification that needs to occur here. Another part is identification. So social identity theory says that people derive some of their self-concept from the group memberships that they ascribe to. And they also get an emotional attachment to based off of these groups. And correlational studies have shown that identification does moderate intended behaviors. However, they are correlational, so some expansion can be done through an experiment. An interesting piece is that group membership is not critical for this change to happen. So I have this picture down here. Currently, Illinois is fighting to get equal marriage, and it passed the Senate, and it's currently going to the House either today or tomorrow. And I'm technically no longer an Illinois resident, but I still identify with this group, so I still get emotional when it passed the Senate. I was happy, I was watching the news, and then I got nervous when it was moving out of the House. We don't know if it's going to pass, but I'm still technically not a member of that group, even though I do identify with it. All right, another criticism of social norms is follow-up issues. So there have been interventions, they've worked, and then after some time, people kind of forget about them, and then they return back to their baseline, or at least trend toward it. And there have been varying levels of follow-up that have persisted and stopped, so 4 weeks, 1 month, 4 months. So this area can be expanded upon a little bit more to kind of clarify why it doesn't work, if there's something that we can do to increase it again. All right, so on to my hypotheses. All right, for my first hypothesis, it is households will conserve more electricity when they receive normative information about a specific referent group rather than a generic referent group. For the second hypothesis, people who identify more strongly with their referent group will conserve more electricity than participants who do not strongly identify with their referent group. The third hypothesis is a bit complicated, it's sort of a two-part one, but essentially it's households that have previously been exposed to a norms comparison, they will, when they receive some sort of prompt, they will return from that baseline back up to their previous consumption during the interventions, or close to it, while people who do not receive the prompt will just continue along the new baseline. Also, households who receive the prompt but who have had previous norms exposure will conserve more electricity than people who get the prompt but have not had previous norms exposure. And then how to test this, and onto the method. So we'll be looking at households right here in San Marcos. Based off of a power analysis for a moderated regression, we're going to need about 750 households. And on average, there's about 3.6 residents in these houses, and previous studies in this area have shown that these houses use roughly 14 to 20 kilowatt hours per day. And then here is just an ethnic breakdown of these households based off of the census data. So we are going to be doing a large mail survey to recruit participants. So we are expecting roughly a 20% response rate. We're hoping for a little bit better, but just in case, we need at least 3,750 participants that we're going to send this initial mailing to. And this study is an extension of a National Science Foundation study that we're going to be running just before it in a couple weeks. And we're doing the recruitment for that study and this study at the same time. So if I slip up and I say 5,000, that's why, because that's counting my study and that study. So they will be mailed the consent form and our survey and a consent to release their data for SDG. So this is San Marcos. You can orient yourself. This is campus right there with the star. So my RAs and I have identified these different neighborhoods, and within these neighborhoods, these are the last 5,000 households in San Marcos that have not been contacted by Dr. Schultz. So we are done here. So we also have a backup in Escondido of 1,606 houses, just in case we don't meet our initial 750, but we have no more single-family homes in San Marcos. All right. So we've been identifying these households using two websites. We've been using Zillow.com and Google Maps. We've been using Zillow to look at each household individually to find different demographic data about them. So we're looking for the price of the house, we're looking for bedrooms, bathrooms, lot size, house size, all sorts of data that is freely available on the internet. And we've also been looking at Google Maps to identify each house specifically to look for solar panels, to look for pools, if they have a solar water heater versus a photovoltaic solar panels, and just other general characteristics about the household. So the survey, we will be gathering demographic data, looking at the size of the house, the number of residents, bathrooms, bedrooms. We want to get that information so we can corroborate what we found from the online, just in case, and also ask them about their use of solar panels, because sometimes looking in Google Maps, you can see that there's something there, but you can't really tell, so we just want to be sure. And here is the survey. So these are 3 of the conditions here. The generic one is just the your neighbors. It's pretty plain and simple. The specific is similar households that are X square feet, with, without a pool, X bedrooms, X bathrooms, and no solar panels. We are eliminating any households with photovoltaic solar panels just because it adds a level of variability to the data. So we want to clean up a little bit. And then the final one, which is the efficient neighbors in the household. So these are scales from Elmer, Spears, and DeHuzy, and we pilot tested similar items to these, and we got good alphas using 2 of the social classes here. We got about 0.9 range, but we did then do a verbal pilot where we asked people how comfortable they were with the words of the questions, if they were interpreting it as we thought they would. So we made a couple changes based off of those findings. So these, we don't have the updated alphas for these, but we're expecting them to be pretty similar. So participants will be randomly assigned to one of 5 conditions. All participants except the first one will get tips on conserving electricity. The second one will just get the tips, and then the other 3 conditions that were just in that survey. So the DV for the experiment is smart meter data, is electricity consumption, daily electricity consumption measured in kilowatt hours. And we are lucky enough to partner with SDG&E, and they will be releasing the customer's electricity data to us, so we do not have to go to the houses individually and read each meter for 750 houses. So this will make data collection easier, it'll also be more accurate, and it will be cleaner, because sometimes people go to the wrong house and read the wrong meter and then get all messed up. So for interventions, there will be 2 weeks of intervention. We'll get their baseline usage from SDG&E. We'll compare their specific usage with their reference group's usage. And then we will provide door hangers for 2 weeks, consecutive weeks, with that feedback. So here is one of the door hangers. This is the one for the generic reference group. So you can see that it's just the plain your neighbors, and it has how much you used and compared to the reference group. And then just to make it clear, we have a more or less, and then the injunctive smiley face. And these are all handwritten so that it's personable and people can take them more seriously. This is the other one. This is the specific reference group here. So they use more, so they get the injunctive sad face. So following the interventions, there will be 3 months of no contact, and then we will begin the follow-up portion of the study. So participants will not be randomly assigned to this first part. The ones who were in those 3 conditions will be reclassified as having previous norms exposure, and the other 2, the control and the information only, will be reclassified as no previous norms exposure. The second part, they will be randomly assigned to receive a prompt or not. We will collect a new baseline because previous research has shown that they trend back towards baseline, but they might not get all the way there. So we just want to have an accurate new baseline. Also, it's 3 months later, the seasons might be a little bit different, so just more accurate this way. We will then send out a postcard booster, and it's just real simple. It just does, your neighbors are actively taking steps to reduce electricity consumption. So real simple, there's no specific comparisons here, it's just a reminder. And then it includes tips. So to analyze this, we're doing the preliminary analyses, just the basic stuff, just to kind of get a sense of the data. The first hypothesis, just a reminder here, is the one that's about the specific reference groups. So to test this, we're doing a mixed model ANOVA, and then I included a probable data graph here. So as you can see, the control group and the tips group don't really change very much from pre to post. And then the specific one is down here at the bottom, where the generic one, they're reducing, but they're just not reducing as much. The second hypothesis is again about the identification with the reference groups. So to test this, we'll be using a moderated regression. The predictor will be the condition, dummy-coded, because there's more than 2. And there will be a couple of them because we have the different conditions, so the generic, the specific, and the efficient. And then the moderator will, of course, be the identification, and we'll be taking that from the survey, the initial survey that they first received, and the responses on that. The third hypothesis, again, is the one about follow-ups. We'll be testing this within ANOVA. I'm hoping that this graph makes it seem a little bit more clear. The words kind of make it a little complicated. But essentially, here is pre-intervention and then post-intervention. So you can see people who've had the previous exposure are lower than the people who haven't had any, and they're just continuing at their original baseline the same time, all the time. And then people who have received the booster in blue are lower than people who do not receive the booster. And still further, the people who receive the booster and have had previous exposure to norms are lower than people who have had the booster but have not had any previous exposure. So conclusions, the study will have applied findings. If this works, it will encourage new types of electricity intervention behaviors, utilizing the reference groups more specifically. There's also theoretical findings, like I mentioned before. The moderating role of identification has been identified, but it's been correlational as of yet, so this will add an experimental design to the literature. Also, it will add to the literature on the sustainability of the interventions. So if there is a criticism that they don't last long, but the booster intervention works, it's a cheap and effective way to continue the savings. All right, thank you. All right, I have just a specific thank yous. Thanks to Dr. Schultz for being one of the best advisors around. Dr. Estrada for being there and accepting my committee request over Facebook. And Dr. Mahler for being flexible with our crazy timeline and being on board. And especially to my RAs for looking at more than 6,000 households individually through Google Maps for countless hours since, November now. And to my lab family, some of you who are here, very helpful. My family and friends. I know my family didn't ever want me to leave again after having gone to Ireland and breaking my back. So they let me go to California on my own. And Justin for letting me leave the apartment randomly at 2 o'clock in the morning to work on my thesis all night without any questions. Especially to NSF and SDG&E, and also to Valissa from Mailing Services, who is helping us get this massive mailing survey off the ground cheaply and efficiently. All right, any questions?
All right. So we already talked about All right, so we open it up to questions from faculty.
Okay, I have 2
Okay.
for this. The first one, you've ruined me. We've talked about this before,
Yeah.
right? I know in my neighborhood, SDG&E sends feedback already with happy faces and sad faces. So my question is, what does that occur in San Marcos? And if so, what are you going to do about it?
They can get that information if they log on to their accounts, but most people don't do that, especially talking to SDG&E. They don't log on and look at their information. They can download the same electricity data that we can. They can get it in, I think it's 15-minute intervals and get all of that data. And that was actually offered as one of our ways of getting the data, but people just, they don't know their account number, and you need that to sign in. There's just a lot of hurdles to do that. So San Marcos doesn't get that.
San Marcos does
Yeah.
not send, I have a feeling maybe you have ruined me too. That, we get it unsolicited, and I get very competitive when I see it, so I fit right in. Okay, so that was just one question in terms of context. And yeah, I curse you all the time. Darn it, he's got me conserving again. There's some amount of time and you're starting in a couple weeks?
We're starting the NSF study in a couple weeks. So we're recruiting for that study. That's going to be run, and then my thesis is going to start in June.
And how long did you anticipate till data collection would be completed for the thesis? From June till when?
Well, we're going to do 2 weeks of intervention, and then nothing for 3 months. So then the booster intervention will take place in, I think, October.
Okay, so between June and October in Southern California, weather changes. Can you address that and how you have built that into your...
And that's why we're going to calculate the new baseline just before the postcard goes out. So that way we're not using the one from early summer. And we will be getting data from SDG&E from 12 months prior and 12 months following. So we can look and see how things have trailed off over the course of the summer. So we will have data for that. So.
Okay.
But you're also randomly assigning to get the condition, right?
Yeah.
And your main
Yeah, and everyone should be experiencing the same season. So.
Okay, so in terms of differences between groups, you could account for that, but it's possible that over that period of time, everybody's consumption would increase. True from baseline?
From the original baseline, but then we'll calculate the one a week before the booster goes out. So that'll be the different season, that'll be a more accurate one. So we'll just be comparing it to them instead of comparing October to June.
Okay.
Makes sense?
I actually have a question about the Google Maps.
Uh-huh.
What are you using it for specifically? Is it part of your analysis as well?
Well, it's to assign people their specific reference group, and we wanted to eliminate people with solar panels, and Zillow doesn't offer information on solar panels, so we have to physically look at the house to see if they have solar panels to take them out. And to have pools, Zillow doesn't offer that information either, so we wanted to look and see, do they have a pool or do they not have a pool? And we also drove around to the houses individually and kind of looked at their roofs and double checked. We couldn't double check the pools because they're in the backyard. But.
So Joey, tell me a little bit more about those handwritten door holders and smiley faces. What's an advantage of doing that, and what's a disadvantage of doing it that way?
Well, a disadvantage is it takes a really long time. And previous studies, people don't really like getting sad faces. So I know with Alyssa's study, she got phone calls getting upset. Why did I get a sad face? So the advantage of handwriting it is that it's more personal and people will kind of look at it and it's not just something that's generic. Someone took the time to write it out, so someone might as well take the time to at least look at it. So we're hoping that will.
What's a disadvantage of handwriting?
That I know personally I have bad handwriting. People might not see it clearly.
Well, what about consistency across conditions?
It's true. We will hopefully be consistent because this is going to be a quick turnaround because we're going to try and do them within a week. So hopefully we'll have the same RAs all there at one time, just knocking them all out. So it can take.
Will they be blind to condition when they're hand drawing those smiley faces and frowny faces?
They won't because the conditions are on the door hanger. They'll be able to see if it's specific or if it's generic by looking at it.
So could they, depending on condition, draw a deeper frowny and a sharper
Yeah,
smiley
I guess
face,
that
more
could be an
smiley?
issue.
So is there any way of keeping the blanket condition at the time that they're writing in those door
I don't know.
hangers?
Because we have to calculate the data and then we'll have that on a spreadsheet and then we'll have to find the address, which we can find, but they're circling. I mean, we could try and take a Post-it and cover up each door hanger individually, but it's here and then here, so it's close to where they're going to be drawing it anyway. And these are going to be pre-printed.
What if they trace them?
Or stamp.
Yeah.
But if you
Well,
stamp it,
Yeah,
you
the
have
stamp
to-
is not.
That's
Right.
what removes the
that
venom.
removes that. If they
Yeah.
traced it, you still have the
Get a stencil or something.
The stencil.
Or is there a way of just, briefly
Maybe it's
covering
a-
up the condition. I mean, if you can keep the blank condition,
Yeah.
you remove that possibility.
We'll have to figure that out.
Okay, something to think about.
Yeah,
Who did you do that pilot with, where you were testing the wording?
we did it with 2 social classes, the undergrad social, so they were.
No, but were you specifically then tested the wording changes that you did?
Yeah,
Oh, the
qualitative.
verbal pilot?
Yes.
We did people in single-family homes around the area.
Okay, so
Yeah,
part of the target group.
yeah.
Okay, great. You talked a little bit about the downloaded data from SDG&E being accurate, more accurate than sending people out.
Mhm.
How do we know that's accurate? Is there anything that you can do to assess the accuracy of that in your study?
Well, we would have to assume that it was accurate because this is the data that they're using to charge people. So we would hope that it's accurate. But I guess the only other way we would have would be to go to the houses and look at the meters and see.
You could do that at least for a subset
Uh-huh.
to verify the accuracy.
Mhm.
And who knows, you may
Yeah.
uncover a major scandal. That between the, and this is my last one, I believe, between the original and the booster,
Mhm.
what are the chances, what are the odds, and is it a concern that homes may change hands?
It will, but to get their data, we have to have their signature and their name. So SDG&E is aware of the exact houses that we're using, and we can talk to them, and if any of the names change over, they would just have to be taken out.
Okay, so you'll have a way of checking how often that happened and whether that differed across conditions.
Yeah,
Because it's the only problem when given that you're randomly assigning it,
Yeah.
shouldn't happen, but if it was disproportionate across your conditions.
Mhm.
Well,
Thank
Joey,
you.
you're removing houses that are for sale, right?
We drove around and we got rid of any houses that are for sale, but in the meantime, if anything happens over the summer,
But new homes,
yeah.
Or something happens between June and October, or,
Mhm.
thank you.
So I was wondering why you think identity is going to increase adherence to norms. What's the theoretical underpinnings of that?
Well, the stuff that I've read on the social identity theory, it says that people internalize the groups. So if the group is changing and you identify with that group, you're going to want to change with it, or it's going to at least affect you in some sort of way.
And so how does identity and similarity relate to each other? How do you expect those two things to relate?
I didn't see very much comparing the two, so I'm just sort of considering identity as a deeper form of similarity.
And could you elaborate a little bit more on, because you use group identification, but there's like a lot of related terms in there. So
Mhm.
thinking about what you're going to measure, are you confident that it's group identification, and what else could it be? It could be like group, my attitude towards the group.
Yeah, it could be like with I'm not identifying with the group. I identify with the group, but I'm not a member, so it could just be that I like the group. But we're asking how similar they are, so we're not asking them if they like the group, if they enjoy being a member of the group. So we're trying to kind of get them in the direction of similarity, but that is an option for people to interpret it that way.
So when you're measuring identity, are you measuring how people feel about the group? I'm still not quite clear. Are you measuring?
So we're asking them, how similar are you? So if they see themselves as a part of the group, if they belong, they're glad to belong with it, if they have strong ties. And then we're going to scale those and then just have one sort of identity measure.
So none of those questions have to do with similarity.
Well,
No.
the first one was
Similar.
similar.
Yeah, I am
similar.
similar. Oh, yeah, there we go, okay.
See myself as a part of.
Yeah.
So.
So the Elmer's paper, what did they call this measure?
I don't know. I think it was group identification.
Yeah.
Remember, it was right here in the
Group identification.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because I think a lot of times people use similarity as a proxy for identity. So they think because you're similar, then you will be,
Uh-huh.
have identification is going to be higher.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to try and pull those two apart and to see if they operate separately or if they really end up being exactly the same thing. So I think you're going to make a contribution in some way.
And we can see just with the first one, I'm similar, and we can compare it to the rest and see.
If it's, yeah, if it holds together with the rest of them.
In your pilot, they held together, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was 0.9, 0.91, 0.94. They held together really well, but like I said, we changed it a little. So in the one where we got the alphas, it says I identify with this group, and people didn't like that. When we asked them, what does the term identify mean to you? Was there anything confusing about the questions? It had identify and similar, and people say, I don't get this identify, similar, different. It's the same thing. Like what? So people, when responding, verbally told us it's the same thing. I don't get it. Why are you asking this question twice? And we got that across multiple people. So.
Other questions from students?
I'm just glad you're not handwriting yourself.
Well, I have a team of RAs. So.
We're all here. Where'd they go?
They got class and stuff.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you very much.